This is Paul Nobles from eattoperform.com. I am sitting here with April Blackford. April, if you want to say hi to everyone.
Hi, everybody.
We have a bunch of people still showing up. No real questions at this point. Kind of hoping to get that stirred up here real soon. This is we didn't have a webinar last week because of the holiday, and so I was expecting this class to be a little bit bigger, but it's actually pretty reasonable size. The big news last week was my calorie wave method article that came out, and it was sort of funny behind the scenes. Everybody, just so you know, April's like, "You're gonna tell them all the secrets."
Did not talk like that.
What now?
I said I do not talk like that.
I foghorn leghorn it up a little bit, but that's what makes it more funny. So I thought the interesting thing about it was that it's the actual system that we actually use for games athletes, for them to lose weight out of season, and it really applies to people that are triathletes or powerlifters or whatever, in terms of kind of getting a gradual fat loss approach. The one thing that's interesting about it is that, and actually we have two other follow-up ideas that kind of came up since then. But what was interesting about the article is I used the example of an elite athlete, and so a lot of people were like, "Oh, this doesn't apply to real people," and things of this nature. This is the exact same system that April will teach with people that want to try and work out a fair amount, early on, as an example, or someone that I would work with. I mean, the reality for a lot of us is that we kind of like to work out, right? And so if you can figure out a way to work out without having a bunch of rest days, then that would be awesome. And the impetus for the idea was there was somebody in a group, and they were talking about, the fact that, each perform was like forcing them into, more rest days, and that's just not consistent with the way that we teach every single person. Like every single situation is a tiny little bit different. And so when I wrote a follow-up, and I may publish it, I may not, I'm not really sure, but it's pretty out there in terms of what the protocol is. But for the athlete who was a female that I was talking about, there's 2,500. We kind of brought her calories down to 2,100 based on the fact that her, everything sort of slows down, and we want to make sure that she's actually in a deficit. And then her overall calories, I believe, were like 1,842 for an average. And the idea was that that was going to sort of sustain for the whole time. Now, let's say that you were a female with a fair amount of fat to lose, and you only work out 3 days a week. The numbers are drastically different. And that's actually one of the reasons why we sort of put out there that you really kind of need to continuously work on your work capacity, and that this isn't a lose 30 pounds in 30 days system. I mean, the idea is to gradually get to where you want to go. I mean, do you have any thoughts on what I'm saying, April? Because I think what happens with a lot of people is they go, "Oh, you used this extreme example," but the reality is that I mean, like, even in the case of, like, my second example was just a regular person.
I started to actually, I was going to let you finish, but Sarah, the fat loss challenge winner, I actually coached her and guided her, and I used a very, very similar protocol, like almost identical protocol.
Yeah, but like her low day, as an example, might be something like 1,300 calories, right?
No,
And so,
it actually wasn't that low on her low days.
okay. Like what would it be?
I
You
think on her low days, I want to say I brought her down to, I want to say I think it was maybe 15, 1600, something
okay,
like that.
right?
But
And which
I think the key though is that, you know, because you put it out and obviously you have a lot of new people who, you know, who haven't joined Eat to Perform and you know, are still kind of looking into it and dabbling with it, is the key that you have to be fed for a period of time. You know,
yeah,
you can't just come in from being in a deficit and say, oh, well, I want to do the wave diet. You know, I want to do that. You know, because it doesn't work like that. You know, you can't come from a low calorie and go even lower. You know, and the same thing with Sarah and then the athlete that you were talking about. You know, they had been fed for, you know, a pretty substantial period of time before you actually make that approach and you can get more aggressive with it.
well, actually, Sarah's would be very similar to the example I used, where the example I used, the low day was 1500, um, which may not seem like eating to perform, or that would be the criticism, I guess. But if you think about the way that most people lose weight, right, or lose fat, they arbitrarily come up with numbers. They don't base them off of much information, and they go, I want to lose X amount of pounds. And actually, your MyFitnessPals or your MyPlates, or a lot of these places, they sort of contribute to this because they just do like a basic assumption on you, and then they give you, how many pounds do you want to lose? I want to lose 10 pounds in 10 weeks, and then all of a sudden, they calculate you at 890 calories, and then you see people trying to, kind of eat at that level, and they're not really factoring your activity and all this other type of stuff. But I think like the key, whether it's 1500 or even I'll even make the argument for something like 1200, right? If you're somebody, you've got a fair amount of fat to lose, it's sort of hard to mobilize fat. Um, Even if your lowest day was say 1200 and maybe your highest day was say 1800, um, your average is still going to be like 1650, 1700 for the week, right? And so the mistake that I think most people make is that they're kind of starving all the time, right? If you're always stuck at that 1200 level, because we see that all the time, right? We see people that like, oh God, I started tracking and I realized I'm only eating 1200, 1300 calories, and then we sort of get them, eating an adequate amount of food, and they can then lose fat, like you said, at 1500, 1600 calories when they weren't losing fat at 1200 calories because they sort of, were just banging the hammer for too long. And so I guess the point being that, even if you're getting a little aggressive, it's not near as bad as long as you have like these days where you're sort of up-regulating, where you're kind of feeding your workouts and things of this nature. And like the next two articles that that I'm writing, and we actually do have two questions I'm going to get to real quick here. But the next two articles, actually, I think it's going to be one article with two concepts. Is the idea of basing your improvement on weeks rather than pounds, right? And I kind of, I was talking to someone and they mentioned that they wanted to get to a goal weight. And as I think most people, maybe you don't know, maybe you do know, but I am also participating in the fat loss challenge. And so if I'll give you an idea what I'm talking about with the weeks concept. So my overall goal is I'd like to get to 170 pounds, right? So let's say I'm, 8 to 10 weeks in, and I'm at 172 pounds instead of 170 pounds. I'm just going to stop right there, right? I mean, I think what ends up happening is people get these arbitrary numbers in their head, and it's like there's so many other factors that come in, especially if you're weight training. You possibly could have added a little bit of muscle. There's a lot of factors that go on, but in general, you just don't want to keep digging this hole, maybe adjusting your macros lower and lower and lower for more extremes. You're just better off stopping. And so that's why I'm kind of introducing the concept of use weeks rather than pounds or fat, if that makes sense. Because you can always reach your fat loss goals at some future point. And I know that the temptation is just to do it right then and there because you're already in the suck, right? You're already, everything kind of sucks. You've done it for 8 to 10 weeks, but realistically, you're just better off stopping. You're better off waiting and then tackling it on later on. But honestly, for a lot of people, when they get into that 6-month cycle where they're actually eating enough for their level of performance and they're building muscle, usually they're addressing fat loss that way. And so even though you may be, say, 2 pounds more than what your goal weight was when you actually check your body fat, you'll see that your body fat is actually working out favorably. Do you have any thoughts on what I'm saying there? Because I think those like century numbers and then the 170. Because I know somebody who was like really stuck on getting to 200, and it was like a really big deal for her, right? So she just started eating like virtually nothing to get under that 200 number, and then within a week and a half she was back 210, 212. So she like killed herself to get under 200, when it was sort of unnecessary.
Well, exactly. Like what you were saying, if it's been 8 to 10 weeks, if you're a couple of pounds from it, there's no reason to continue to push it, because you're basically just gonna, it's not gonna be beneficial to you in the end, rather than taking a break for a period of time, a couple of months, and then restarting again, and then you may lose the 2 pounds plus another 10 easier by changing your focus, your direction. Just like I was doing the fat loss, not really doing the fat loss challenge, but doing the cut as well. And just by me dropping a training day, dropping a training day in general, I've already dropped. And I'm still keeping my carbs up pretty high. Even on rest days, I still keep my carbs up over 200, and I've already dropped 5 pounds.
Right.
And we talked about this before, and you were asking me my goal, and I honestly don't know what I don't know what the number is, because I have a feeling that I'm going to look completely different because I've added a lot more muscle over the past couple years at 125 pounds, or I might look different at 128 than I would at being at 122.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, I think people have unrealistic thoughts about what they're going to look like when they lose a certain amount of pounds or something like that. And I'm just going to tell you, in the mirror, there's a noticeable change right now for me, right? I'm seeing that second tier of abs pretty clearly, all these favorable things. And, my workouts, have been, there's certain parts of it that are good. There's other parts that, I noticed, like, as I start to get into like 45 minutes of like some of my lifting sessions and things like that, I start to wear down, whereas I normally wouldn't if I was eating an adequate amount of food. Certainly my sleep hasn't been great, especially on my lower days. But my point being, I think that this is really important. When you establish the goal as 8 weeks or 10 weeks, it allows you mentally to get to where you want to go, right, without like all the mental BS, right? So you go, okay, I stuck to the plan for 8 to 10 weeks, and I got to where I needed to go, where my body would allow me to go based on the plan that I had in place. And then I learned a bunch of stuff, right? And so if you do have to, come after some fat loss later on, you can now take that information. I mean, I can think of 5 things that I've learned this time around that, have really made a big difference for me. And I think for, like, I've kind of gotten my groove. Like, I'm already seeing 174 on the scale. So I'm certainly headed, trending towards 170, but I'm not really trying to get caught up in that. My real goal is to see the challenge through. I started on January 5th, so ideally my end date would be March 5th. I could possibly extend it to March 19th, but truthfully, I think the idea for me is just to focus on sticking to the plan, and whatever you can do that sort of gets you there, is helpful. I think what ends up happening is if you go too aggressive, now all of a sudden, you find yourself, well, hey, can I have a cheat day? Or hey, can I, do this or that? And it's like, well, if you're hungry, yeah, you should eat. You know, honestly, I've felt great all along, and I anticipate on being able to kind of run with these macros throughout. So, well, we talked a little bit about this. We do have a few questions, so let's go ahead and jump right into those. Susan's saying, if you're hitting your calories, carbs, and protein, but go over in fat, can you still lose weight? Well, that's kind of a loaded question, but the simple answer is probably no. I can tell you that one of the things that there's a lot of factors that go on here. I mean, did it increase your level of activity? Are you like just killing it in the gym? Things of that nature, right? But fats are energy dense, and when you're trying to eat in balance, I mean, the whole point is to kind of keep some level of control over all of it. And so what ends up happening for a lot of people, especially some people that have come from like a low carb background or a paleo background or something like this, their fats end up getting high, and so when your fats are high, and I'd be interested to know. Let's see. She said, lose fat and gain lean muscle, not just lose weight. I mean, you could gain lean muscle. It really sort of just depends. I mean, if you were eating an inadequate amount of food previous to this, certainly having an adequate amount of food, fats will sort of get you, your calories up. But like if you're saying, well, I'm eating more carbs, and maybe those carbs are 150 grams, and then you're eating 125 grams of fat, usually that's going to kind of blunt your muscle protein turnover and things of that nature, and so you're really not going to see like that lean mass gain that you might see if your carbs were higher and your fats were a little lower.
I think she can correct me if I'm wrong. I think she's asking if she's eating her appropriate caloric amounts with the proper carb, protein, and fat ratios, can she still gain muscle mass and lose body fat while maintaining her weight? I think that's what she's asking. Which I would say absolutely yes, that you can. Laura in the CrossFit Masters group, she's a prime example where her weight pretty much stayed stable, and over the past couple months, I think she's added like 8 or 9 pounds of muscle and has lost, 4 or 5
pounds. Were her fats high?
Do what?
But were her fats high?
No. I think
this woman is saying that her fats were high.
Oh, okay.
You see, I get what you're saying, but what I'm saying is
no, I absolutely agree with you. I thought she was asking if she's hitting the proper rate.
Yeah, she is in fact saying, like, I think she is saying, and Susan, you can correct us if we're wrong, but she's saying that she's hitting her calories, but her fats are high. She wasn't too specific. She's hitting her calories, carbs, and protein, but going over on fat. This is what happens in a scenario where you kind of get that puffy paleo look. That's what people have been. She's saying not the ratio. I'm saying hitting calories, keeping carbs at right level and close to right of protein, but going about 15 over in fat. Okay, 15 grams in fat, is not a lot. It's 145 calories. That's certainly not going to be that big of a deal. But I would say if you're looking to gain lean mass, you'd rather go over on carbs than fat, right? That's the big secret here. It's not that fats are bad. In fact, when we're having people cut, we tend to have them cut fats because they need the carbs for their workouts, and they need to kind of maintain the energy for those workouts. But when you have too much fat, it sort of blunts the benefit of the carbon protein. And so you sort of get, you'll start building tissue, but it's not always muscle, right? You certainly need an adequate amount of calories to build muscle, but I would say in Laura's example that April was saying, she was able to get lean. There's really a lot more going on here, though. I mean, can you give me a little bit more specific, Susan, on what your exact situation is? She's saying, yes, that is the heart of my question. What does the fat contribute versus protein and carb? Honestly, most people don't have any trouble getting an adequate amount of fats. It really is a struggle to get their protein and carbs. It's kind of interesting that you're saying, can you give me more specifics on what your macros are? She's saying, I need to lose a good amount of weight, but I definitely struggle to keep the fat down. If you need to lose a fair amount of weight, I can tell you the fat is not your friend in a lot of instances. And I know why you can't keep the fat down, because the fat is kind of filling. And even if, for instance, you were eating less than what you would normally, let's see, okay, she's giving me her numbers, so this is good. So they're at 85, carbs 100, and then 260, calories 2300, 1865, protein 175. So, I mean,
how much were her carbs?
Can you tell me how tall you are, Susan? Okay. So she's 5'3". Based on your protein, I think I kind of have a good idea on what your weight is, and I think that that would not fit the definition of what I think of when somebody says I need to lose a good amount of fat. Okay, I do agree you probably could lose some fat, and I'm sure that's why you're here, right? But it doesn't sound to be super extreme. I mean, if your fats are at 85, are you saying that your fats then go up to 100 as an example? Yeah. If you want to lose, weight and ultimately end up losing fat, keeping your fats that high, I was actually going to talk about this. As an example, yesterday, I had I sort of just ate what was around the house, right? And I tracked every single day, and usually I can find a good groove with that. And this morning, I weighed myself, and my weight was up a little bit. And so I looked at my, it was a workout day that day, and I looked at my, macros to see if I could kind of figure out like what happened, right? And my fats actually were 89. And I was like, wow, I didn't think my fats were that high for that day. What I think happens for a lot of people, realize if you're providing your body a good amount of fat, right, it's not going to draw off of your body fat. And that's ultimately what we're trying to get you to do. Now there's a lot of factors going on here, right? And, we don't know where you're coming from in terms of undereating, overeating, things of that nature. And, certainly that's a little bit more the function of the forums. But if I was in your shoes, what I would probably be focused on is trying to get my fats, in that 75 and possibly even down to 50 on some of your control days, so you can see more, like you could draw off some of your stored body fat. But I will tell you, it takes work. I mean, like a lot of work. I mean, you're going to be eating like chicken breasts. You're going to be eating things like, oatmeal with protein powder, things of that nature. I mean, and you could think of a whole food option if that's kind of your goal. But in general, you have to kind of work at eating lean foods, and so that would be the one adjustment that I would make for you, is that on your low day, I'd probably like to see your fats at least at 65, and even on your I mean, I go as low as 50 a lot of the time, and usually that I see a pretty good result there. I mean, do you have any thoughts on this, April?
Not knowing what her weight is, I don't know if
Well,
50,
I know
50
where
maybe,
I know where the
you
weight
know
is.
what her weight is?
Yeah,
Hmm?
it's not
Okay.
it's not extreme.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
she probably thinks it's extreme, but I mean, it's maybe a little bit above average.
depending, and I think I was kind of confused about the whole question in general, whenever I had actually spoken up before. I agree with you in
I mean,
regards
she's
to
saying she
random.
eats 100 grams of fat, and she's trying to lose fat.
No, I totally agree, totally agree, and I
This is
think the
this is not like rocket surgery, right? Um,
well,
I
I think also you have to she has to keep in mind that like she was saying, she's generally over fats by 15 grams, which adds up to 145 calories. If she's hitting her protein and her carbs, she's basically going over her calories by 145. If you look at that over the course of a week or 2 weeks, she could actually be slowly gaining weight instead of going in the opposite direction.
right,
If she actually, rather than staying within her caloric ranges, and if she chooses to go on fat, over on fat, taken away from somewhere else. The strategy that I usually recommend for someone when they're trying to cut their fats back is like what you said. Choose leaner sources, but also, your whole day doesn't have to be completely lean, but you have to look at it as, if I want to have this sirloin steak, or if I want to have this fat with, lunch, then I need to be more conscientious of breakfast and dinner. You can't have chicken thighs for lunch and ribeyes for dinner, and 4 eggs for breakfast and think you're going to stay within your fat macronutrients, because you're not.
what you're ultimately saying is you have to have a good plan.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and so pretty much anybody that's really looking, I mean, I think a big part of what we do here, Susan, is sort of talk to people about their strategies and kind of refine their strategies. And that's also the value of kind of looking at these short windows for fat loss, right? Um, because you go, well, gosh, it really sort of sucks because I like to have ground beef and I like to have ribeyes, and we're not saying that you wouldn't have those things eventually, right? But if you can take like a shorter period of time, and instead of eating, like fatty ground beef or something like that, maybe switch to chicken, maybe switch to seafood, some of these things to kind of get you through. It really makes huge differences. And then, for anybody that says, well, like we're anti-fat, I mean, that's total BS, because, what we do is we start adding in fats on, the days that where you're not dieting. That's ultimately how you do it. And so, ultimately, I think there's a couple things going on. I think, first of all, your situation's not near as bad as you think it is. I know you probably have some fat that you would like to lose, and we certainly, hopefully, will be able to help you with that. But more importantly, if you can sort of just start to bite off the elephant in chunks, I think you'll have a better time of this. Because what I can tell you for fact is that there's a lot of people that have seen a lot of success with Eat to Perform, but not a lot of people have seen long-term success thinking, I have a lot of weight to lose. That's the first thing you need to get away from, okay? Because when someone says to me, I have a lot of weight to lose, I think, okay, we're talking about a 300-pound person, right? You're not a 300-pound person. And so some of the messages that you tell yourself is going to be a big part of what your journey is going to become for the rest of your life. And so, is any of this helpful, Susan? I sort of hope she sort of responded, but it's been a few minutes. She said that is very helpful. So I mean, I hate to always tell people like, hey, you need to be more patient, but I think a lot of times people look at fat loss and they go, well, this is the one direction, and we're going to try and work towards a deficit. It seems like you're really open to the idea of eating more, which is awesome. And if we can get you to a point where you can maybe plan a little bit better, I can tell you right now, one of the things I said earlier, I'm kind of finding my own groove with this, is if you're not planned, you're screwed. I mean, really, planning becomes such a big deal. And so if you can kind of wing it from a calorie standpoint, a macro standpoint, things of this nature, but it's so much easier if, you go throughout the day and you go, well, I'm supposed to be eating this here, I'm supposed to be eating this here, and, really even planning your days somewhat in advance. I mean, I kind of have a general idea on what I'm going to be eating for the next, couple of days. And like as an example, yesterday when I ate a little bit more fat, I'll sort of learn from that and go, well, instead of having my dark chocolate macadamia nuts, as a bit of snack, maybe at that point I would have like a Vitargo or something of that nature that's a little bit more carbs since it was a workout day. She's saying, I was focused on hitting calories and carbs as high as I could with protein, which is what I struggle finding, but I think the key is to find more lean protein. Bing, bing, ding, ding, ding. That is a big key, because especially red meat is surprisingly high, in fat in a lot of instances. So I'm going to move on to the next questions because we got a few other people that have asked questions. So if you have a follow-up, just let me know. Mike was asking, I usually rest on Saturday and Sunday, so my calories are lower, but I find that on Monday I don't have as much energy as I do the rest of the week when I'm eating more. Any ideas on how to get my energy up for Mondays? I mean, April, I can let you take this, but I can tell you, my initial thought is that having that back-to-back on Saturdays and Sundays sort of sucks.
Oh, I totally agree. When you have 2 rest days in a row, you can pretty much guarantee that next training day is you're not gonna beast it out. I think a strategy he could take, depending upon what time he trains on Fridays, he could basically load around his workout and do a semi-controlled day that day, reduces his overall carb intake down a little bit, go lower on Saturday, and then Sunday not full-on high carb, but eat more than he normally would later at night or with dinner, which would have him basically better fueled for Monday's session, would be my strategy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any problem with any strategy, but, it sort of depends. I mean, the weekends are sort of difficult because, a lot of times, you'll go on dates with your wife, your girlfriend, your whatever, right? And weekends tend to be something that you sort of want to enjoy, and so you don't want to make them like this miserable experience. It could also mean that you're going too low. I don't know what your goals are, but in general, I would not set up 2 control days, right together, and then have 5 days where you're eating. I don't think you'll see a lot of success doing that. I can tell you from past experience that that becomes really difficult and then becomes more of a drudgery than you would like. I would probably rather see you, let's see, he's saying performance first goal, fat loss second goal. I would say that you'd be better off having one of those days, probably Sunday night, if it was my preference. If you were asking me as a trainer or coach, I would say I would have a good sized meal with starchy carbohydrates on Sunday evening, so you're set up for Monday, right? But what I would do is find days during the week where your sessions aren't as intense as normal. For example, for me, if I'll tend to go a little lower on my yoga days, and then I tend to go a little lower on my upper body days, and sort of save. Let's say my calories would be 2,500 on a workout day, might go 2100 on a upper body day, or or a yoga day or something like that, if that makes sense. And so I wouldn't go as extreme on the weekends, and I'd find at least, one to two opportunities during the week where your workout sessions aren't going to be so extreme, and then you can kind of, uh, cut things back. But also keep an eye on whether or not you're being too aggressive. That's the other thing.
And
And
another tip is Vitargo, because this stuff is like the best stuff ever. I actually had 3 rest days in a row, not by choice, but I was repainting and redoing my great room slash dining room, which is a very large room, and I worked on it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for a combined total of 26 hours in those 3 days. And those were all 3 rest days. And yeah, it was tough. So today I went in to do deadlifts, and I totally didn't expect to do anything, but of course I had a pre-workout meal with my grits like I normally do, and I did 1 scoop of Vitargo. Man, I was just blowing it up. So
yeah,
that stuff is amazing.
I think really any drinkable carb would work there, though. You could use like in the past I've used like a waxy maize with Gatorade mix. Um, you know, it's one strategy. Like we're saying, I don't know when your workout is. Like if his workout, as an example, is 5:30 a.m. on Monday, kind of slamming Vitargo. Let's see, good stuff. Vitargo the night before. Yeah, Vitargo the night before if workout early a.m. Yeah, that's what I think. That'd be consistent with what I would say, but also what April is kind of talking as well. So yeah. Oh, one thing I was going to comment on, April. What a lot of people don't factor in is when they do stuff outside of working out. Like you said, painting. That's an extreme thing outside of working out. And so you have to factor these things in. And so, like when I was in Miami for Wadapalooza, as an example, you wouldn't think that it would be like this super extreme type thing. You're just kind of walking around, but then all of a sudden, like if you start to track it, you realize you've walked miles, so you need more food. And so, always keep that in mind, you guys, is that if you have active days, you might have to add a little food, and that's okay. That's kind of part of what this is all about. So Steve's saying, what are your thoughts on compression gear? Is that an accurate measurement or strength, or is that fudging the numbers a little bit? Well, it depends on what you mean by compression gear. If you're just talking about like 2XU pants or things of that nature, yeah, that's not anything, But there are geared athletes. Maybe that's what you're referring to, and geared athletes for the most part are like, it's just a different sport. It's just a whole different deal. And I used to work out with people that competed in gear, and I mean, they were some of the strongest people I'd ever met. But it's just really kind of apples and oranges. Now, in terms of compression gear, I love compression gear. Man, you give me some compression gear, and I am just freak for that stuff. I've got like 6 pair of tights, like the 3/4. I guess you would call them like capris or whatever. The bicycle shorts. I mean, I love everything about compression gear. I like it. It does seem to give you a little bit more support, like when you're squatting and things of that nature. But I wouldn't say it rises to the level of cheating. Even something that's pretty tight like 2X shoes, I don't think are that big of a deal. What are your thoughts on compression gear, April?
I think it actually helps. I've had days before where I had like serious case of DOMS where I could barely walk.
Yeah.
And if I put on a good tight pair of compression,
Yeah.
man, it really allows me to be able to move a little more freely, and it takes away some of that pain. So I do think that it's very beneficial.
Yeah, no, I actually speaking on that, if I have like a big session and I know that, I'm potentially going to be sore, I'll wear my compression pants. I'm big into the virus tights. I've got probably 4 to 5 pair of those. And so the virus elites I will wear on days like you're talking about and just wear them all day long. And sometimes I'll just wear them underneath my sweatpants. I mean, I live in Minnesota, so it's cold, so you can get away with that. Um, but but yeah, no, compression gear, I wouldn't say it's cheating. Or is it an accurate measure of strength? I don't think it really makes that big of a difference. But if we're talking about briefs, or we're talking about, you know, some of these like suits that guys have to like, wedge their way into it, it's sort of meant to give them that advantage. So Jeff's asking, hi, April and Paul, finishing week 3, each perform, coming off 4 to 5 years, lower carb paleo, up 5 pounds. From what I understand, this is most likely water gain. Yeah, I mean, essentially what you're doing, Jeff, is rehydrating your muscle. Now, you're sort of at the upper end of what we would like, but it really comes down to what your comfort level is. Like if you're if you think adding 5 pounds is comfortable for you, then awesome. We support you. But there are a lot of women in your situation that probably wouldn't want to do that, and so we tend to say that 3 to 5 pound range is probably about the most that you would want to do, and you would want to get maybe a little bit more serious about your control days, maybe get a little bit more serious about uh, making sure that you're kind of working out with the intensity that justifies your caloric, intake. And sometimes it takes a little while for your body to adjust to that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, essentially, if you kind of had dehydrated muscle based off of kind of a low carb paleo background, it's going to take a while for your body to adjust to that, and that's totally normal. See, he's saying, happy with the way I feel and perform, not so much the weight gains. Couple things that you could do in terms of the weight gains is maybe add a little bit of cardio, just to kind of adjust. The one suggestion that Mike always makes that I think is a really good suggestion for somebody like you is, we do suggest that you have carbohydrates before and then carbohydrates after. What I would suggest to you, if your weight's a little higher than you'd like it to be, then maybe cut out the pre-workout carbohydrates for a bit, because your body's going to take in the carbohydrates a little bit better post-workout for the time being. And so what I would do is sort of get that weight, maybe in that 2 to 3 pounds range, and then start adding a small amount of carbohydrates pre-workout. But until you kind of sort of adjust to this metabolically, it's going to take a while. And what you would normally see, at least right now, is that your activity level should go up. What ideally is going to happen is your activity level is going to go up enough to justify that extra 5 pounds, to where it'll just kind of go away over a while because your work capacity has risen. And so I would definitely keep an eye on the weight. Certainly, if you're gaining weight, a lot of times, if you get to that 10-pound range, you're probably gaining fat. 3 to 5 pounds, we've seen people gain 3 to 5 pounds of muscle in a very short period of time coming from your situation. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about it, but I would definitely keep an eye on it, and I would definitely say you were smart to ask the question you asked. Any thoughts on that, April?
I think within the 5 pounds, usually 5 pounds is about normal for a male. They're just larger, more muscle, more. They came from a dehydrated, like you were saying, muscle, from very low carb background, and then basically they're retaining more fluid and water in their muscle. But 5 pounds, I think, is completely normal as long as the weight has stabilized and it's not continuing to trend up. I wouldn't stress about it. If it's continuing to trend up, then at that point, then we need to make some adjustments on your macros. Maybe some little tweaks here and there if it's continuing to trend up. But if it's leveled off and it's basically stable at this point, I wouldn't stress it.
The other thing that I would try is to have at least 1, possibly 2 days where you're lifting slow. Almost like bodybuilding. But what I typically do rather than, bodybuilding is I just have like slower circuits 1 to 2 days a week. I think that'll make a really big difference for you because, if you can, do chin-ups as an example, 7 chin-ups, and then, a lot of times if I'm focusing on upper body, I'll do like ring dips and then maybe like bench press, so I'll just load up a lighter weight, like 135, for tens, things of that nature. Really try and get in reps with rest. Don't try and do it for time, or anything like that. And a lot of times that will help you get a little bit more metabolically adjusted because in the end, your metabolism is based on your muscle. And so if we can get that muscle more useful, that's a good thing. And the way that you do that is slow and with rest, as well as some of your high-intensity training and things of that nature. Let's see. Marion, say Mark, male, 6'2", 200 pounds, 7. Jeff says, I'll give that a try. I got to tell you, Jeff, that has made a huge difference for me is not just adding those 2 days, but taking out the other 2 days where I was wadding and, that collective toll on your body. And then you go from that to actually building and really kind of recovering, right? So like if you have like a big snatch workout and your glutes are sore, maybe your lower back's a little tight or something of that nature, having like a upper body circuit, man, is really awesome. It's something I've enjoyed a lot, kind of moving to that, especially being 46. So let's see, Mark, 6'2", 200 pounds, 17% body fat, 100 grams of fat, 190 grams of protein, 300 grams of carb on workout days. My body fat has been stagnant for about 3 months. Let's see, getting stronger in the gym month after month, however, physical appearance is unaltered as well as biometric numbers. Any ideas on what to tweak? Yes. What I would try, at least for a little while, is to try and lose weight. And probably the way that I would accomplish that, I'd be interested to know what your rest day macros look like. But in general, I probably would bring down your fats. I don't know what your workouts look like, so that would also help. But having 100 grams of fat, I think if you're trying to lose a little body fat, going down to 75 grams of fat to see if you can kind of get the scale moving in a positive direction, I think that would be positive. Let's see, he's saying for his rest days, he goes to 120 grams of fat, 190 protein, 200 grams of carbs. What I would suggest is stay at 100 grams of fat on your rest day, and your carbs coming down will account for your deficit on that day, and then on your workout days, go down to 75 grams of fat. And how many days do you work out? You say workouts are oriented around 20 muscle, 20 minutes muscle, 20-minute conditioning, 3 to 4 days a week. Okay.
I I think he's not taking a large enough deficit on his rest days, because if he's increasing the fats and only
Yes.
reducing his carbs in a touch, his calories are almost the same all days. So you
Yeah,
got
if you're
to,
saying you're unaltered at those macros, good
that's
for
right.
you, dude, because honestly, you're eating a lot of food, you know. I mean, it's not like an extreme amount of food, but it's 120 grams of fat is a lot of fat. And once again, I mean, fat's perfectly fine, but if you want to get from say 17 to 12, you know, 5% body fat is only 10 pounds, and so coming down to say 100 grams of fat on your rest days, and then your workout days, you're probably actually inhibiting a little bit of the benefit of the 300 grams of carbohydrate by having your fats that high. And so you might actually get a little bit of a benefit just from your carbohydrate uptake, kind of turning into a little bit more muscle in the process. It says he also does 3-4 sessions of steady state cardio per week. Yeah, I mean, it's starting to sound like you work out a lot more than you know I don't know that we would recommend necessarily, because how people work out is sort of their own thing, but I wouldn't necessarily say that what you're doing. Let's see, saying barbells shredded, ring a bell. Yeah, barbells shredded rings a bell. I wouldn't say that those macros look like something that I would think would get somebody shredded. Um,
I agree.
yeah, I
I think
think
I
I,
think
I
he
think
actually I think he actually has a good training setup from what he
yeah.
says
Oh
to
yeah.
focus on fat loss if he just got the proper macronutrient.
He just had his macros set up way too high, man.
I
I
agree.
mean, even for somebody, you know, I mean, I would say that my activity level is it's probably close to as high as that, and I mean, even though I'm only 5'8", I certainly don't eat that much. Now, I would eat that much. I mean, those are probably good maintenance macros for you, but it's probably not something. I came up with the numbers after using the TDEE calculator. Yeah, I think the mistake that people make with the calculator is that they end up getting too aggressive. The TDE calculator is really going to kind of keep you the same for the most part. It's really more to kind of let you know where your macros should be to perform well. But it sounds like you're performing well. You're able to work out numbers of times a day. I mean, you're working out 3 to 4 days a week. You're having 3 to 4 sessions of long, slow cardio. So your workouts are not an issue. Um, so now we need to look at, okay, well, what would we need to do to get shredded, right? And what you need to do to get shredded is to come up with a calorie deficit. And I would think the first place to start is 75 grams of fat on your workout days, keeping your macros relatively the same, and then come down to 100 grams of fat on your rest days. Um, and you should see some movement. If you don't see movement, then we need to talk again. And probably the best strategy there is just going to be to go in the forum and sort of get someone to set your macros. But you're not near as far. I mean, the fact that you're actually maintaining at about 17% with those macros relatively high, I think is a good thing. That means you're probably set up to see some real good results. So anyway, it is. I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anyone, and it looks like I did not. So we're going to shut things down. I appreciate everybody's questions, and anything you can think of as we leave, April?
No, I was just going to tell Marion to get into the forum, and we can certainly give him a customized plan to get him started to start seeing results.
Yeah, I think you're already kind of set up pretty well there. Just a little bit more refinement and you'd be good. So I appreciate everybody being here, and we'll be in touch. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.